Please note that no AI, colorization or digital enhancement has been applied to my personal archive of original postcards, photographs, slides and negatives featured on this YouTube channel. One can see what a lovely building this was. It was not the original pub, however, but Birmingham itself is a city that treats its urban landscape as a palimpsest more than any other place in the UK. Indeed, the multi-storey car park next to the wholesale meat market that was built in place of the buildings in this section of Bromsgrove Street were flattened in the early 2020s. Something else will emerge, only to be replaced again later in the century. That's the story of Birmingham. The Black Swan Hotel was located on the northern side of Bromsgrove Street, on the western corner of Market Street. An old licence that traded here from the early 19th century, the public house closed in the early 1970s when the markets area was redeveloped. Like I say, this was a lovely building and a real loss when demolished. Unlike the catalogue-designed red terracotta public houses, the Black Swan had plenty of originality and was created with a range of building materials in a rather fanciful hodgepodge style. Stone mullion windows set in red brick with slate and plasterwork, the designer borrowed from classical architecture and mixed it up with Tudor and Gothic. The purists may not have liked the work, but it was certainly aesthetically pleasing to many and an enrichment to Bromsgrove Street. Originating from the offices of James and Lister Lee, the building plans for the structure were submitted on December the 11th, 1885, and construction started in the following year. This structure replaced the original Black Swan, a house that dated back to at least 1801 when it was listed in the licence register. The property seems to predate the Dolphin Inn by a couple of years and also the New Inn across the road. John Pitchfork was the licensee in the early entry for the Black Swan in the licence register. Before the end of the Napoleonic Wars, he was succeeded by Aaron Jones, a publican who later moved to the Rose and Crown on Cheapside. He handed over to William Fulford, who remained at the helm for many years. Born in 1791, he was possibly a widower by the time of the 1841 census, which shows him living on the premises with his son George. 3 servants, Mary Ann Kendrick, Joseph Field and Mary Payne, were listed at the Black Swan. The house served as an inn, and at the time of the census, 4 of the occupants were recorded as comedians. No doubt they were engaged at one of the nearby theatres or music halls, or maybe in the Black Swan itself. George Fulford became a publican himself before his marriage to Louisa Hubbard in August 1844. She was a daughter of the cordwainer Richard Hubbard. The couple succeeded his father in running the Black Swan Inn during the late 1840s. In addition to hiring Sarah Garbett as a general servant, they employed Henry Herbert as an ostler, confirming that the inn was accommodating horses in a stable block as outlined by the electoral roll at this time. One would assume that the parents of Robert Bruce Edmonds had Scottish ancestry to bestow him with such a name. Actually, there are more Robert Bruce Edmonds than you would imagine. When I searched for him, there were plenty of others with the same name. This particular Robert Bruce Edmonds was born in Birmingham in 1813. He was a boot and shoemaker by trade and living in Ann Street when he married Sarah Andrews at the parish church of St Bartholomew at Edgbaston in November 1841. The couple established a home in Little Charles Street where they lived with their young daughters Eliza and Clara. The former worked in the Black Swan when the family moved to Bromsgrove Street in the late 1850s. They employed Elizabeth Bishop as a general servant. Robert and Sarah had their heads screwed on and made a success of their working lives together, but by the time of his death in April 1880, the estate of Robert Bruce Edmonds was some £4,000, which represented a career of good fortune and hard endeavour. The family had moved out to Leafy Hall Green by this time. However, his brother Christopher remained in the town as he had an ironmongery business in Navigation Street. The original Black Swan had a first-floor clubroom. This was proved by an application for a music licence by Robert Bruce Edmonds in August 1863. He provided the room's dimensions to the magistrates, which were 30 foot by 15 foot and 10 foot tall. Not a huge space, but is one in which he intended to hold music events on 2 nights per week between 8 and 11 in the evening. Robert Edmonds was one of those publicans who mixed with influential figures in the town. He was involved in local politics and would use the clubroom for political gatherings. The Black Swan also hosted meetings of the United Harmonic Chairmen's Association. A man who strove for learning and erudition, Robert Edmonds became well known for the eclectic debates held at the Black Swan. All manner of topics were discussed in the house on Sunday evenings. On one evening the topic of debate was, "Has the government of the Emperor Napoleon been beneficial to mankind?" Charles Flavel was one of those publicans who moved around a lot. He kept the Black Swan for a short spell in the late 1870s. I've encountered his name at a number of houses, including the Horse and Jockey at Digbeth and the Brown Lion on Horsefair. Joseph Lawrence appears to have been the last person to run the old Black Swan Inn. William Kirkland was at the helm of the new Black Swan Hotel, which was possibly completed in 1886, but certainly by 1887. Indeed, William Kirkland is recorded as the proprietor in the licensing records, but he would later sell his interest to Atkinson's Brewery Limited of Aston. It would seem that William Kirkland was a man who did the rounds in the licence trade. Born in 1830 at Rugeley in Staffordshire, he came to Birmingham at a relatively young age and lived in Ladywood, working as a gas fitter. In September 1849 he married Emma Price at St Bartholomew's Church at Edgbaston. By the early 1860s the couple were running the Robin Hood, a beer house in Cottage Lane at Sandpits, Ladywood. Between having lots of children, the Kirklands were in charge of the Punch Tavern in St Vincent Street during the early 1870s. However, in May 1872 they moved to the Greyhound Inn on Edward Street and Parade. Edward was also working as a lamp maker during this period. However, it is a puzzle to me how he came to be the proprietor of the Black Swan Inn. Maybe his second wife Sarah was well minted. Once the new hotel was built and opened, many societies were eager to use the Swish Clubroom for their meetings. For example, the Butchers' Sick and Dividend Society met at the Black Swan Hotel, further bonding the relationship of the building with the local traders at the nearby market. Another body to meet at the hotel was the British Amalgamated Society of Journeymen Basket Makers. No doubt a reason for the Butchers' Sick and Dividend Society meeting at the Black Swan was that publican William Henry Ball was himself a butcher by trade. He worked at the nearby market, making the journey to work from his home at Coyotes Lake Road in Sparkbrook. Prior to taking over at the Black Swan Hotel, he was a meat inspector for the Birmingham Markets Committee. He was once assaulted by an angry slaughterman when he seized some diseased liver which he detected on an inspection. Dudley-born William Ball was prudent enough to take out an accident insurance policy which paid out £1,000 to his wife Martha when the publican died following a bizarre event at the Black Swan in 1895. Resting one foot on a case of ginger beer under the counter, he was leaning on the servery reading a newspaper during a quiet session. When he turned away, possibly to serve a customer, his toe got caught between the crate and the top of the counter, causing him to fall backwards. The publican, described as a very heavy man, hit his head very hard on the cash register. 2 days afterwards he died from a clot of blood on the brain. Thomas and Eliza Higgins were running the Black Swan Hotel in the early Edwardian period. Eliza was from Sally Oak, but her husband hailed from the village of Whittington in Gloucestershire. London-born William Crisp Rose was the licensee at the end of the Edwardian period. His wife Ellen hailed from Loughborough in Leicestershire. The couple had earlier kept the Nag's Head at Crewe in Cheshire. The nation was certainly upwardly mobile by this time. Francis Zeller had formerly worked for Shoals before a spell working for new owners Atkinson's Brewery Limited. He kept the Black Swan Hotel with his Dudley-born wife Rebecca. Before the First World War, Francis Zeller took up an admin role under the Shoals umbrella, where he was promoted to secretary and manager in Walsall. A popular local figure, he was also director of the Walsall Theatres Company. He lived for his 70 before he died in 1930, aged 72. Joseph and Sarah Jeffcott kept the Black Horse for a short spell in the 1920s. The couple had previously run the Tamworth Arms in Moore Street. They were succeeded by Harry and Hannah Aspinall. During the Edwardian period, Harry Aspinall had worked for the corporation as a lamplighter. The couple would later move westward, and prior to the Second World War they were running the Fountain Inn on Hagley Road at Stourbridge. Bernard and Florence Webster managed the Black Swan throughout the whole of the 1960s. The couple had married during the Second World War, so I guess they were not part of the swinging 60s scene. The last person to run the Black Swan Hotel was Peter Jordan, who held the licence between 1971 and 1973. Thanks for viewing and listening to my blurb. If you enjoyed the video, please give a thumbs up. Post your comments below if you have more info or a question. If you think these video clips rock, you can also subscribe to the channel.